Look at her, Hunter. 32 years old, and she is still riding the bus like a teenager. My mother, Beatrice, laughed, her voice cutting through the warm air of the dining room like a serrated knife. I kept my head down, focusing intently on the dry turkey on my plate, but the humiliation burned the back of my neck. Hunter, my brother-in-law, swirled his expensive red wine and smirked, his blue eyes filled with that familiar condescending pity. You know, Jada, public transportation is great for the environment, but if you need a car, I can get you a beat-up trade-in from the lot. It might smell like wet dog, but at least it is wheels. The whole table erupted in laughter. My sister Ebony, my father, even the cousins, they all thought it was hilarious that the black sheep of the family was a failure. I felt my phone vibrate against my thigh, one single long vibration. I slid my hand under the table and glanced at the screen. A notification from my chief financial officer. It read simply, "Acquisition complete. You now own 100% of Hunter Motors." I looked up at Hunter, who was still laughing at his own joke, completely unaware that the woman he was mocking had just become his boss. Before I tell you how I fired him without saying a single word, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to sit in silence while people who have no idea who you really are tried to tear you down. My name is Jada, and for the last 5 years, my family has believed I am a struggling data entry clerk. They have no idea that the data I analyze controls a $3.2 billion transportation empire. But let's go back to where this nightmare began just 3 hours before that dinner in the freezing cold of a Chicago Thanksgiving. The snow was coming down in thick, heavy sheets, burying the driveway of my parents' suburban McMansion in white. I was walking the last half-mile from the bus stop, my old sneakers crunching against the ice. The wind whipped through my thin coat, biting at my skin, but I didn't mind. Walking helps me think. It helps me analyze logistics. But as I approached the house, the peace was shattered. A midnight blue Porsche Cayenne roared up the street, the engine growling aggressively before drifting into the driveway. It cut through the snow with arrogant ease, nearly splashing slush onto the sidewalk where I stood. The driver door opened, and out stepped Hunter. He looked every bit the successful car salesman he claimed to be, wearing a camel hair coat that probably cost more than my first apartment. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door for my sister Ebony. She stepped out like royalty, wrapping a white faux fur coat tight around her body. She didn't look at the snow. She looked at her phone, probably checking her Instagram engagement. Mom and Dad were already at the front door, beaming like they were welcoming dignitaries. "Oh, look at you two, my mother," Beatrice squealed, rushing out in her slippers to hug Ebony. "You look like a movie star, baby. And Hunter, is this the new model? It is beautiful." Hunter tossed the keys to my father, as if Dad were a valet. "Keep it warm for me, Pop. It is German engineering at its finest. Heated seats, twin-turbo V8, real power. Not that you would know much about that, right, Pop?" Dad just laughed, clutching the keys like they were a prize. "Of course, son. Only the best for my girl." I stood at the end of the driveway watching them. I was invisible. I adjusted my backpack, which contained a laptop worth $40,000 and encrypted hard drives that held the secrets of global shipping routes, and trudged up the path. The cold was seeping into my bones now. As I reached the porch, shaking the snow off my shoulders, my mother turned around. Her smile vanished instantly. "Jada, you are late. And look at you, you are soaking wet. Do not track that slush onto my hardwood floors. I just had them polished." I stopped, my hand hovering over the door handle. "Mom? It is a blizzard out here." The bus was delayed. Beatrice blocked the doorway, her arms crossed. Her eyes scanned my outfit with disgust, lingering on my worn-out sneakers. A choice I made for comfort and speed, not because of poverty. But she saw what she wanted to see. "Use the back door, Jada, through the garage. I do not want you ruining the aesthetic. Everyone is already inside having cocktails. Try to dry off before you come in. You look like a drowned rat." Ebony giggled, nuzzling into Hunter's shoulder. "Yeah, Jada, seriously. Have some respect for Mom's house. Maybe if you bought a car, you wouldn't be so wet. Hunter chuckled a low, grating sound. Easy, babe. Not everyone has your drive. Some people are just destined to be pedestrians. They turned their backs on me, the warm golden light of the hallway swallowing them up as the heavy oak door slammed in my face. I stood there for a moment, listening to the lock click. The biting wind stung my cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the coldness radiating from that house. I walked around to the side of the house, navigating through the deep snowdrifts to the garage entrance. I entered through the mudroom, the smell of roasted turkey and sage stuffing hitting me instantly. It should have smelled like home. Instead, it smelled like obligation. I took off my coat and hung it on a hook, watching water drip onto the linoleum. I took a deep breath, composing my face into a mask of neutral indifference. This was the game I played, the stealth game. When I finally walked into the living room, the party was in full swing. My parents had invited a few neighbors, probably to show off Hunter and Ebony. Hunter was holding court by the fireplace, a glass of bourbon in one hand. I was telling the regional manager, you cannot sell luxury if you do not live luxury. Hunter boomed, his voice projecting so everyone could hear. That is why I am the top earner at the dealership 3 years running. You have to project success. I tried to slip past them toward the kitchen to help, but Hunter spotted me. There she is. The traveler returns. He raised his glass in a mock toast. How was the commute, Jada? Meet any interesting characters on the public bus today? The neighbors turned to look. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not from shame, but from the sheer effort of keeping my mouth shut. It was fine, Hunter, I said quietly. Reliable. My father snorted from his recliner. Reliable. You know what is reliable, Jada? A job that pays enough to buy a vehicle. That is reliable. You are 32. When I was your age, I had 2 cars and a mortgage. I walked into the kitchen to escape, but there was no sanctuary there. Mom was basting the turkey, frantic and high-strung. Don't just stand there, Jada. Grab the tray of deviled eggs, and for God's sake, tuck your shirt in. You look sloppy. We have guests. I did as I was told. I carried the tray out, weaving through people who didn't bother to say hello to me. I was the help. I was the failure. I was the cautionary tale they whispered about to their children. See, that is why you go to business school like Ebony, not mess around with computers like Jada. Dinner was served an hour later. The dining table was set with Mom's best china. There were 12 seats, but when I looked for my name card, I didn't see it. Mom, where am I sitting? I asked. Beatrice didn't even look up from carving the bird. Oh, we ran out of room at the main table, honey. Hunter invited the Johnsons last minute. You can sit at the folding table in the hallway. It is quiet there. You like quiet, don't you? The folding table, in the hallway, like a child, like a servant. I saw Hunter whisper something to Ebony, and she covered her mouth to suppress a laugh. That was the moment. That was the precise second my patience evaporated. But I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I simply pulled a chair from the kitchen and dragged it right up to the corner of the main table, squeezing in between Dad and Hunter. What are you doing? Mom hissed. I am eating dinner with my family, I said, my voice calm but hard as steel. I sat down and unfolded my napkin. The room went silent. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Hunter cleared his throat, deciding to break the tension by putting me back in my place. He leaned back, looking at me with that smirk. You know I was serious earlier, Jada. We have a 2010 Honda Civic on the lot. High mileage bumpers falling off, but I can talk to the finance guy for you. With your credit score, you will need a co-signer, obviously. Maybe Dad can sign for you again. Dad sighed, shaking his head. I am done signing for her, Hunter. She needs to learn on her own. If she wants to walk everywhere, let her walk. It is pathetic, really. A grown woman with nothing to her name. Mom chimed in, passing the potatoes. It is not just the car, it is the ambition. Ebony is expanding her wardrobe for the winter gala. Jada, what are you doing? Still staring at spreadsheets all day for minimum wage. I took a sip of water. Actually, I am working on a logistics merger, I said. Hunter laughed so hard he nearly choked on his wine. Logistics merger. You mean figuring out the best route for the mailman? Listen, leave the business talk to the big dogs, Jada. You do not understand how the real world works. Money talks. And right now, your silence is deafening. That was when the phone vibrated. I looked down. The email from my legal team was marked urgent. Subject title transfer confirmed. The attachment showed the deed to the land Hunter's dealership stood on and the controlling interest in the parent company. I looked at the time. 7:00 p.m. The automated system had just processed the wire transfer. $3.2 billion had moved through the cloud, reshaping the market, and nobody at this table had a clue. I looked up at Hunter. He was still grinning, waiting for me to cry or leave. That is what I usually did. I usually ran away, but not tonight. Is something funny? Jada Ebony asked, noticing the change in my expression. I sliced a piece of turkey with precision. No, I said softly. I was just thinking about what you said, Hunter. About money talking. Yeah, what about it? Hunter challenged. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. It just spoke, Hunter. And it had a lot to say about you. He frowned, confused. What is that supposed to mean? It means I said, reaching for the cranberry sauce, that you should probably enjoy this meal. It might be the last one you can afford for a while. Mom slammed her fork down. Jada, stop being rude. Apologize to your brother-in-law immediately. He tries to help you and you threaten him. I am not threatening him, Mother. I am advising him. Hunter rolled his eyes. You are crazy. This is why you are alone, Jada. You are bitter. You see our success and you cannot handle it. I checked my watch. My helicopter pilot had just texted me. ETA 15 minutes. He was landing in the country club field behind the house. You are right, Hunter, I said, standing up. I cannot handle it. That is why I am leaving. Sit down, Dad barked. No, I said. I have a flight to catch. Flight? Ebony scoffed. What economy class to nowhere? Something like that, I said. I grabbed my phone and tapped the screen, forwarding a document to Hunter's email. You might want to check your inbox, Hunter. Work never stops, right? Even on Thanksgiving. Hunter pulled out his phone, annoyed. If this is spam, Jada, I swear to God, I will. His voice trailed off. His eyes widened. He scrolled down, his face turning pale, draining of all color, until he looked like the snow outside. His hands started to tremble. What is it? Ebony asked, touching his arm. Baby, what is wrong? Hunter looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. This says. It says, your dealership has been acquired. I finished for him, by Logos Dynamics. So what Mom said? What does that have to do with Jada? Hunter swallowed hard, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple despite the cold. He looked at me with pure terror. Because, he whispered, because the CEO of Logos Dynamics is Jada. The room went deathly silent. The only sound was the wind howling outside and the distant rhythmic thumping of rotor blades cutting through the winter sky, getting closer and closer. The morning sun reflected off the obsidian glass of the Logos Dynamics Tower, turning the 70-story skyscraper into a beacon of dark light in the center of the Chicago skyline. 12 hours ago, I was shivering in a bus shelter, wiping snow off sneakers that my mother deemed an embarrassment. Now the tires of my armored sedan crunched softly against the private underground ramp. The driver opened the door and I stepped out. Gone was the oversized coat and the posture of a beaten dog. I smoothed the lapels of a charcoal suit that cost more than Hunter's entire annual salary. My heels clicked against the polished concrete floor, a rhythmic sound of authority that echoed in the silence of the secure garage. I approached the private elevator that only had one button. It did not require a keycard or a code. I simply looked into the small black lens mounted on the steel panel. A soft blue light scanned my iris. A mechanical voice devoid of judgment or mockery broke the silence. Welcome back, Madam Chairwoman. The door slid open smoothly, As the car ascended at a speed that would make ears pop, I watched the floor numbers blur on the display. This was my reality. The woman at the dinner table, the one who shrank away from insults and ate in the hallway, was a ghost. A necessary disguise. When the doors opened on the penthouse floor, the hum of activity was instantaneous. This was the nerve center of global logistics, a room where billions of dollars in cargo were tracked in real time. As I walked down the central corridor, the atmosphere shifted. Dozens of analysts and executives stopped their conversations mid-sentence. Heads bowed, eyes lowered. It was not fear. It was reverence. "Good morning, Ms. Jada," a junior executive whispered as I passed, clutching his tablet to his chest. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. In this world, I was not the black sheep. I was the shepherd. I pushed open the double doors to the boardroom. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of the city, covered in the white snow that had frozen my bones the night before. But in here, the temperature was perfectly controlled. My chief financial officer, Marcus, and the rest of the board were already seated. They stood up in unison as I entered. I took my seat at the head of the table, placing my phone face down. "Let us begin," I said, my voice steady and commanding. "Give me the global status report." Marcus tapped the glass surface of the table, and a holographic map of the world materialized in the air before us. Thousands of tiny lights moved across oceans and continents, representing ships, cargo planes, and autonomous truck fleets. "We have a supply chain bottleneck in the Suez Canal due to a sandstorm," Marcus reported, highlighting a red zone on the map. "Rerouting through the Cape will cost us 12 hours, but save 40% in potential insurance claims. Do we have authorization to divert the fleet?" "Do it," I said without hesitation. "And authorize the purchase of the local fueling station in Cape Town. If we are going to use that route, we might as well own the infrastructure. We don't pay rent to anyone, not anymore." Marcus nodded, typing the command. The red lights on the map turned green as the fleet adjusted course. This was power, real power. Not the petty power my father felt when he dangled car keys in front of me, or the power Hunter thought he had because he drove a Porsche. This was the power to move mountains, to feed nations, to control the flow of the world economy. After 40 minutes of high-level strategy, the room cleared out, leaving only Marcus and the head of my internal audit team, a sharp woman named Sarah. The holographic map faded, replaced by a single grim spreadsheet on the screen. Sarah cleared her throat, looking uncomfortable. "Madam Chairwoman, we need to discuss the new acquisition. The Hunter Motors dealership chain. We completed the hostile takeover at 7:00 p.m. last night as per your instruction. However, during the due diligence audit this morning we found discrepancies." I leaned back in my leather chair, steepling my fingers. "What kind of discrepancies?" Sarah swiped the screen, enlarging a series of highlighted transactions. "It is not just mismanagement. It is fraud. Significant skimming from the deposit accounts. We have traced multiple transfers from the dealership's operating fund into personal accounts linked to a Mr. Hunter Vance. He has been taking cash deposits from customers with bad credit, promising to secure them loans, and then pocketing the money to pay off gambling debts. He is cooking the books to make his sales figures look higher than they are. Technically, the dealership is insolvent." I stared at the numbers. They were sloppy, amateurish. Hunter was not just a bully, he was a thief. And a stupid one at that. Sarah continued, her voice professional but cold. "Under normal protocol, we would fire the entire management team, immediately file police reports, and freeze their assets. I have the termination papers drafted and ready for your signature. We can have security escort him out of the building within the hour." I reached out and took the tablet from her. I looked at Hunter's face on the personnel file. He was smiling that arrogant, winning smile. The same smile he gave me when he offered to help me buy a beat-up car. If I fired him now, he would play the victim. He would tell my sister and parents that the big bad corporation ruined him. He would hide the theft. He would never truly learn his lesson. And my family would never see him for what he really was. They would just blame me for not saving him, even if they didn't know I was the one firing him. No, I said softly. Marcus looked surprised. No, Jada, he is stealing from you. Every day he stays in charge, you lose money. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the tiny cars crawling through the slush on the streets below. Somewhere down there, Hunter was probably walking into that dealership right now, feeling like a king because he survived the night. He thinks he is untouchable. If we cut him off now, it is just a setback. I do not want a setback. I want a collapse. I turned back to face them. Do not fire him. In fact, I want you to do the opposite. Approve his request for the expansion budget. Inject $2 million of capital into the dealership's credit line. Send him an official commendation from the parent company praising his aggressive sales tactics. Sarah's jaw dropped. You want to give him more money? He will just steal it. Exactly, I said, my eyes narrowing. He is a rat, Sarah. And you do not catch a rat by chasing it. You catch it by leaving out a pile of cheese so big he cannot resist it. Make him feel like he is the golden boy. Make him feel like the new ownership loves him. Let him buy more inventory. Let him hire more staff. Let him take Ebony on vacation. Let him dig the hole so deep that when the ground finally gives way, he won't just fall. He will be buried. Marcus slowly started to smile. He understood. You are fattening the pig before the slaughter. I picked up the stylus and signed the digital authorization for the funds. Not just that. I want him to bring my family down with him. They think money is everything. Let them taste it. Let them gorge on it. And then when they are choking on their own greed, we will turn off the tap. I handed the tablet back to Sarah, release the funds, and send an invite to the dealership management for the annual gala. Tell Hunter he is being considered for Executive of the Year. I want him there front and center when we expose everything. Sarah nodded, a look of terrified respect in her eyes. It will be done, Madam Chairwoman. I looked back out at the city. The snow was stopping, revealing the grime and the gray concrete underneath. My family thought I was nothing. They thought I was weak. They were about to learn that the quietest person in the room is usually the one holding the remote control to the explosives. And I had just set the timer. While I was in my office approving a multi-million-dollar infrastructure deal, my sister Ebony was fighting a very different kind of battle across town. I did not need a spy to tell me what was happening. I just needed to watch her Instagram live. She was standing in the middle of the Hermes boutique on Michigan Avenue, holding a Birkin bag that cost more than most people earn in a year. She had the camera angled perfectly to catch the lighting, her smile bright and practiced. Hey guys, she chirped to her followers. Just picking up a little treat for the gala tonight. You know how it is. A queen needs her armor. She placed her platinum credit card on the glass counter with a flourish. The sales associate, a woman with sharp eyes who had seen 1,000 women just like Ebony, ran the card. There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable silence that the live stream captured perfectly. The associate looked up. I am sorry, ma'am. The card has been declined. Ebony's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. That is impossible. Try it again. It must be your machine. The associate tried again. Beep. Declined. Do you have another form of payment? She asked politely. Ebony snatched the card back, her face flushing red beneath her heavy contour. This is ridiculous. I am going to call my bank. You people always have technical issues when a black woman walks in here. She turned to her phone, realizing she was still live streaming. She quickly ended the video, but the damage was done. I watched the replay in my office, sipping my espresso. The facade was cracking. Ebony did not have a bank error. She had a limit, and she had hit it hard. But instead of retreating, she did what she always did. She screamed. She made a scene until the manager came out, and then she stormed out of the store claiming she was taking her business elsewhere. She wasn't a victim of the system. She was a victim of her own delusion. My phone rang. It was my mother, Beatrice. I let it ring twice before answering. I knew exactly what this call was about. Ebony would have called her crying, spinning a story about how the mean store clerk humiliated her. Jada. Come over here right now, Mom demanded. We have a family emergency. I sighed. An emergency usually meant someone was dying. In my family, it meant someone was embarrassed. I left the office changing back into my comfortable, nondescript clothes in the car. When I arrived at the house, the emergency was immediately apparent. The living room was a disaster zone from the Thanksgiving party the night before. Wine stains on the carpet, empty glasses everywhere, and piles of dishes in the sink. Mom was sitting on the sofa massaging her temples while Ebony lay sprawled on the chaise lounge, sobbing dramatically with a cold compress over her eyes. Thank God you are here, Mom said, not bothering to stand up. Look at this place, Jada. It is a pigsty. The maid is off today and I have a migraine. You need to clean this up before Dad gets home. He cannot see the house like this. I stood in the doorway looking at the mess. So the emergency is dirty dishes, I asked. Don't be smart, Mom snapped. The emergency is your sister. She is under a tremendous amount of stress. Being a public figure is exhausting, Jada. You wouldn't understand because nobody knows who you are. But Ebony has a reputation to maintain, and right now that reputation is under attack. Ebony sat up, her mascara running down her cheeks. They humiliated me, Jada. It was a glitch, a banking glitch. But now I can't buy my dress for the gala. Hunter is going to be executive of the year, and I can't show up looking like a pauper. Mom walked over to the mantel and picked up a piece of paper. It was a credit card statement. She walked over to me and shoved it into my hand. We need you to handle this, Jada. Just a small administrative error. Hunter's bonus hasn't cleared yet, and Ebony's card is maxed out. We need you to pay this so she can get her dress and clear the balance. I looked at the bill. It wasn't a small administrative error. It was $5,000. $5,000 for clothes, spa treatments, and dinners all charged in the last 3 weeks. You want me to pay $5,000? I asked, keeping my voice level. Mom, I work in data entry. That is 3 months of rent for me. Mom waved her hand dismissively. Oh, please. We know you have savings. You don't spend money on anything. You wear those rags, you take the bus, you don't go out. You must have a nest egg sitting there. Stop being stingy. This is for your sister. This is for the family image. I looked at Ebony. She wasn't even looking at me. She was back on her phone, probably deleting comments about the declined card. She expected this. She expected me to fix it, because that is what I had always done. I was the safety net they didn't respect but always used. No, I said. The room went silent. Mom blinked as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Excuse me. I said no. I repeated, handing the bill back to her. I do not have $5,000 to pay for a dress Ebony is going to wear once. And even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you. If the card is declined, maybe she should stop spending money she doesn't have. Mom's face turned a shade of purple I had rarely seen. She took a step closer to me, invading my personal space. Her perfume was overpowering, a cloying floral scent that made me nauseous. How dare you, she hissed. How dare you stand there and lecture us about money? I carried you for 9 months, Jada. I pushed you out into this world. I fed you, clothed you, and put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me, by watching your sister suffer over a few measly dollars. She is not suffering, Mom, I said, standing my ground. She is facing consequences. There is a difference. Mom poked a manicured finger into my chest. You are jealous. That is what this is. You are jealous because Ebony shines and you fade into the background. You are jealous because she has a husband who loves her, a man who is going places, and you have nobody. That stung. She knew exactly where to aim. Look at you. Mom continued, her voice rising to a shout. You are 32 years old and you are alone. And do you know why? It is not because of your looks, Jada. It is because of your heart. You are cold. You are selfish. No man wants a woman who counts pennies and turns her back on her own blood. Hunter was right about you. You are pathetic. Ebony chimed in from the couch, her voice dripping with venom. Just leave her alone, Mom. She wants to see me fail. She probably loved it when my card got declined. She is bitter because she will never be invited to a gala like the one we are going to. She belongs on the bus. Mom grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You listen to me. You will clean this living room, and then you will go to the bank and you will withdraw that money. Or so help me God, Jada, you will not be welcome in this house again. I looked down at her hand on my arm. Then I looked into her eyes. There was no love there. There was only control. For years I had desperate for a crumb of affection from this woman. I had thought that if I was good enough, successful enough, or obedient enough, she would finally look at me the way she looked at Ebony. But now, seeing the naked greed and malice in her face, I realized the truth. It was never about me. It was about what I could do for them. I pulled my arm away firmly, breaking her grip. I smoothed out my sleeve. I am not cleaning this room, Beatrice, I said, dropping the title of Mom. And I am certainly not paying that bill. If Ebony wants a dress, she can sell one of the 3 cars she claims to own. I turned around and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard the sound of a vase shattering against the wall. Get out, Mom screamed. Get out and don't come back until you learn your place. You are a disgrace to this family. I walked out into the cold afternoon air. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I took out my phone and called Sarah. Sarah, I said, my voice calm. Proceed with the plan for the gala. And Sarah, make sure the seating chart places my family at table 4. Table 4, Sarah asked. But Madam Chairwoman, table 4 is right next to the kitchen doors. It is the worst seat in the house. I know, I said, getting into my car. It is exactly where they belong. The next afternoon I sat in my corner office at Logos Dynamics, but my attention wasn't on the global shipping routes displayed on the wall monitors. Instead, I was focused on a single secure video feed streaming directly to my tablet. The camera was hidden inside a smoke detector in the general manager's office at Hunter Motors. The office that Hunter occupied like he was the king of Chicago. On screen, Hunter looked frantic. He was typing furiously on his computer, moving money around with the desperation of a man who knows the walls are closing in. I watched as he transferred a $20,000 deposit from a customer named Mrs. Higgins directly into his personal gambling account. He let out a sigh of relief, leaning back in his leather chair and dialing a number on his cell phone. I turned up the volume on my tablet. He was calling his college buddy, a hedge fund manager in New York. The conversation that followed made my blood run cold, not out of fear but out of pure, unadulterated disgust. Yeah, I covered the spread. Hunter laughed, propping his feet up on the desk. I just borrowed a little from the customer deposits. Nobody checks the books here, man. The owners are absentee, and the staff is too scared of me to say a word. He paused, listening to his friend, then laughed again, a cruel, mocking sound. My in-laws. Please. They are clueless. I wave a shiny object in front of them, and they clap like seals. I have them wrapped around my finger. They think I am their savior because I buy the good wine. It is almost too easy. I watched him swirl the whiskey in his glass. Then his voice dropped, becoming lower and more sinister. Well, most of them are easy. There is the sister-in-law. Jada. Yeah, the dark-skinned one. She is different. She is sullen. She sits there and stares at me with those eyes. Doesn't say a word. It gives me the creeps, honestly. She acts like she is better than us, but she is riding the bus. It is pathetic, but you know how it is. Sometimes you have to deal with the help to get the princess. I froze. The help. That was how he saw me. That was how he saw my entire family, really. We were just props in his play, stepping stones for his ego. He didn't love Ebony. He loved that she worshipped him. He loved that my parents treated him like a white savior who had graced their family with his presence. I saved the recording to the secure server, adding it to the growing file marked Operation Collapse. I closed my laptop. It was time to go home. I knew exactly what was coming next. Hunter had just stolen $20,000, but he needed more to cover his debts. And I knew exactly who he was going to try to squeeze. When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, the atmosphere was electric with false hope. Hunter was already there, pacing the living room floor like a preacher at a revival. Mom and Dad were sitting on the edge of the sofa looking at him with rapt attention. Ebony was beaming, clutching a brochure for a luxury vacation in the Maldives. Jada, come in, come in, Hunter said, waving me over with manic energy. I was just telling the family about a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I stayed by the door, keeping my coat on. What kind of opportunity, Hunter? An IPO. He said, his eyes wild. Inside stock options for the dealership's parent company. My boss told me that if I can put down $50,000 by tomorrow morning, I can buy shares that will triple in value by next week. Triple, Jada. We are talking about life-changing money. Mom clapped her hands together. Isn't that wonderful? Hunter is going to make us all rich. There is just one small problem, Hunter said, his voice dropping to a sad, manipulative whisper. I am a little illiquid right now. All my cash is tied up in investments for our future, and Ebony has maxed out her credit for the gala. Mom and Dad have already helped so much with the house renovations. He turned his blue eyes toward me, the predatory gaze of a shark sensing blood. But you, Jada, you have zero expenses. You live like a monk. You have been working for 10 years. You must have clean credit. I felt the air leave the room. I knew where this was going. I do not have $50,000, Hunter, I said calmly. No, but you have leverage, he countered quickly. I have a friend who runs a private lending company, high risk, high reward. If you sign a personal guarantee, he will give you the cash tonight. I will pay you back next week with interest. Double interest. My mother stood up, her face flushed with excitement. Jada, this is it. This is your chance to finally contribute to this family. Hunter is offering you a deal. You want me to go to a loan shark? I asked, incredulous. You want me to take out a predatory loan with a 300% interest rate so Hunter can gamble on a stock tip? It is not gambling, Ebony snapped. It is investing. God, you are so small-minded, Jada. That is why you are poor. You are afraid to take risks. Hunter is trying to help us. I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the floor, ashamed but silent. He knew this was wrong, but he was too weak to stand up to the golden boy. Dad, I said softly, you spent 40 years working at the post office to keep your credit perfect. Are you really going to let them force me to destroy mine? Dad mumbled something about family sticking together, but he didn't look up. Mom stepped forward, her voice hardening. Do not look at your father. Look at me. We gave you everything, Jada. We took you in when you failed at that startup years ago. We fed you. Now your brother-in-law needs help. He is family. If you do not do this, if you let this opportunity slip through our fingers because you are too selfish to sign a piece of paper, then you are no daughter of mine. I looked at Hunter. He was smirking again, that same smirk I had seen on the security feed. He knew I wouldn't do it. He didn't want the money from me. He wanted to break me. He wanted to prove to my parents that I was useless, so that when his house of cards eventually fell, he could blame me. He could say I could have saved us, but Jada wouldn't help. I took a deep breath. The anger that had been simmering in my gut for years finally cooled into something hard and sharp. A weapon. I will not sign the loan, I said. Hunter threw his hands up. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Mom pointed to the door. Then get out. If you cannot support this family, you don't deserve to be part of it. Get out of my house, Jada. I opened the door, the cold wind hitting my face. I looked back at them one last time. My mother blind with greed. My sister lost in vanity. And Hunter the architect of their destruction. I hope that investment pays off, Hunter, I said, because you are going to need every penny. I walked out into the night. As I walked down the driveway, I pulled out my phone and called my head of security. It is Jada, I said. Flag Hunter's IP address and send the recording of his phone call to the district attorney. But hold off on the arrest warrant. I want him to walk into that gala tomorrow night thinking he has won. I want the fall to be spectacular. The living room of my parents' house felt less like a home and more like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. The air was thick and stagnant, smelling of my mother's heavy perfume and the lingering scent of stale coffee. Mom and Dad sat on the love seat, their postures stiff and unyielding. Ebony was pacing back and forth near the fireplace, her heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood. And there sat Hunter, lounging in my father's favorite armchair, like a king on a throne, a folder of documents resting casually on his knee. I stood in the center of the room, still wearing my coat, feeling the collective weight of their judgment pressing down on me. Nobody offered me a seat. Nobody offered me a drink. "We are having a family meeting," Beatrice announced, her voice leaving no room for argument. "And since you are technically still part of this family despite your best efforts to embarrass us, we have decided to give you a chance to redeem yourself." Hunter leaned forward, that oily smile spreading across his face. He extended the folder toward me. "It is a simple formality, Jada. A standard co-signer agreement. Since you refused to take out the loan yourself, we found another way." I took the folder and opened it. My eyes scanned the legal jargon and my stomach churned. It was not just a loan agreement. It was a collateral lien. They were asking me to put up my apartment as collateral for a high-risk business loan of $200,000. I looked up confused. "You want me to put up my apartment? But you guys always say I live in a shoebox. Why would a bank want my apartment as collateral?" Ebony stopped pacing and let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "Oh, honey, don't flatter yourself. The bank doesn't want your little studio." But Hunter's financial advisor said that since you have lived there for 5 years and paid rent on time, showing stability, we can use your lease history to bolster the application. It shows character or whatever. I almost laughed out loud. They thought I was renting. They had no idea that I had bought the entire building 4 years ago through a shell company. They had no idea that the shoebox they mocked was actually a 5,000-square-foot penthouse with a private elevator. They were trying to leverage a property they didn't even understand to fund Hunter's gambling addiction. I closed the folder and tossed it onto the coffee table. The sound of it hitting the wood echoed in the silent room. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, sharp and final. "Excuse me," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "I said no." I repeated, looking directly at Hunter. "I will not sign this. I will not put my home on the line for this." "You are being selfish," Mom snapped. "We are talking about your brother-in-law's future, about your sister's future." "I am talking about reality, Mom," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "Open your eyes. Look at him. Hunter is not investing. He is drowning. He is scamming you." Hunter stood up abruptly, his face flushing red. "Watch your mouth, Jada." "No, you watch yours," I countered, taking a step toward him. "I know about the gambling, Hunter. I know about the debts. I know you are stealing from the dealership to pay off bookies." "Liar," Ebony screamed. She rushed across the room, her face twisted in rage. "You are a liar, Jada. You are just jealous because my husband is successful and you are nothing." She raised her hand and struck me. The slap was loud and stinging. My head snapped to the side. My cheek burned, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the shock. I touched my face, slowly turning back to look at them. My father didn't move. My mother didn't gasp. They just watched, as if I deserved it. As if I were an unruly child who needed to be disciplined. Hunter chuckled, a dark, ugly sound. He walked over to Ebony, wrapping his arm around her waist, pulling her close as if to protect her from me. "You see that, Ebony?" he said, looking at me with pure contempt. "That is the ugly face of envy." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He crumpled it up and threw it at me. It hit my chest and fell to the floor. "Here," he sneered. "Since you are so worried about money, take that. It should cover your taxi ride back to the ghetto. Do not be jealous just because I am a white man who knows how to make money and you are just a bitter little girl stuck in the slow lane. It is not my fault I was born to win and you were born to lose." I looked at the money on the floor, then I looked at my parents. Dad was looking away, unable to witness the shame of his own silence. Mom was glaring at me, her chin raised in defiance. "Pick it up," Mom said coldly. "Pick it up and get out." I stared at her. The woman who gave birth to me. The woman who was supposed to protect me. In that moment, something inside me broke. Not the kind of break that leaves you shattered, but the kind that snaps a tether, setting you free. I stepped over the money. I straightened my coat. I looked at each of them in the eye, memorizing this moment. I wanted to remember exactly how they looked when they threw me away. "I am not jealous, Hunter," I said, my voice deadly calm. "And I am not losing. I am done." I turned to my parents. "I hope you enjoy the gala tomorrow. I really do. Because after tomorrow, the only time you will see me is on the news." I turned on my heel and walked toward the door. Mom's voice followed me, shrill and desperate. "You walk out that door, Jada, and you are dead to us. Do not come crawling back when you are hungry. Do not come back begging for a handout." I opened the front door. The cold night air rushed in, cleansing the stench of betrayal from my lungs. "Don't worry, Beatrice," I said without looking back. "I won't." I slammed the door shut. The sound was final, like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. I walked down the driveway, leaving the Porsche, the mortgage, and the lies behind me. I didn't call a taxi. I called my driver. "Take me to the airfield," I told him. "I have a company to run. And I have a funeral to prepare for." "Whose funeral, madam?" the driver asked. "My family's," I said. "They just died tonight." The morning after I walked out of my parents' house, I stood in my office looking at the Chicago skyline. The city looked different from up here. Down on the street it was cold and chaotic, but from the 70th floor it was just a grid of lights and data points. I felt a strange sense of calm. The emotional cord that had tethered me to my family's approval for 32 years had finally snapped, and in its place was a cold, hard resolve. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. "Sarah, please come in, and bring the event coordination team." Sarah entered a moment later, looking slightly nervous. She knew about the personal nature of the Hunter Motors acquisition, but she didn't know the depths of the betrayal I had endured the night before. She placed a tablet on my desk. "Madam Chairwoman, the annual Logos Dynamics Gala is scheduled for next month. The venue is booked and the invitations are ready to be printed." "Cancel them," I said, turning away from the window. "Move the gala to tonight." Sarah blinked, her professional mask slipping. "Tonight?" "But madam, that is impossible. The catering, the security, the guests. We cannot organize a black tie event for 500 people in 12 hours. "We do not need 500 people," I said. "We only need the board of directors, the key shareholders, and the press. And we need one specific table of honor. I want you to send a priority courier to Hunter Vance at the dealership. He is to receive a personal invitation to receive the Promising Entrepreneur of the Year award." Sarah started taking notes furiously. The Promising Entrepreneur Award. I wasn't aware we had such a category. "We do now," I said. "Make the invitation look expensive. Gold leaf, heavy cardstock, the works. I want him to believe that the new parent company sees him as a visionary. I want him to think he has fooled us all. And Sarah, make sure the invitation explicitly includes his family. My parents and my sister. I want them all there." I watched Sarah leave to execute the order. It was a logistical nightmare for my team, costing the company nearly $500,000 in rush fees, but it was worth every penny. This wasn't just a party, it was a stage, and I had written the final act. Across town, the bait was delivered exactly as planned. I watched the security feed from the dealership as a courier in a uniformed suit handed Hunter a thick velvet envelope. Hunter opened it, his hands actually trembling. When he pulled out the card, the gold lettering caught the fluorescent lights of the showroom. He let out a whoop of joy that startled the customers. "Yes, I knew it. I told them." He grabbed his phone and dialed Ebony immediately. "Baby, pack your bags. We made it. The new owners. They are not firing me. They are honoring me." I listened to his voice crack with excitement. He truly believed his own lies. He thought that his doctored sales numbers and his theft disguised as creative accounting had actually worked. He thought he was being rewarded for his brilliance. Ebony's voice on the other end was shrill with excitement. "Are you serious, Hunter? An award?" "Serious as a heart attack." Hunter laughed. "It is the Promising Entrepreneur Award. This comes with a bonus, baby. I am sure of it. This is the big leagues. Mom and Dad were right. I am the golden goose. The trap was not just sprung, it was swallowed whole." The reaction at my parents' house was instantaneous and chaotic. For a family that claimed to be wealthy, they scrambled with the desperation of people living on the edge of ruin, because they were. Hunter's gambling debts and Ebony's spending habits had left them with zero liquidity. They had the invite to the ball, but they didn't have the shoes. I monitored their credit activity through the banking alerts I still had access to. It was a tragic comedy of errors. First, Ebony tried to book a limousine. Her card was declined again. Instead of accepting defeat, she called a predatory payday lender. I saw the inquiry hit her credit report instantly. She took out a $2,000 loan at 400% interest just to rent a stretch Hummer for 4 hours. Then came the close. My mother Beatrice insisted that they could not be seen in anything they had already worn. "We need to look like old money," she told them, completely missing the irony that old money doesn't buy new dresses for every dinner. They raided their own jewelry boxes. I watched the GPS tracker on my father's phone as he drove to a high-end pawn shop downtown. It broke my heart for a split second to realize what he was selling. It was his grandfather's pocket watch, the one heirloom he had sworn never to part with. He sold it for a fraction of its value just to hand the cash to my mother so she could buy a sequined gown that looked cheap despite its price tag. They were liquidating their actual legacy to buy a fake image. Back at the house, the atmosphere was manic. Ebony was screaming at a makeup artist she had hired, demanding more contour to hide the stress lines on her face. Hunter was pacing around, rehearsing his acceptance speech in the mirror. "I would like to thank my family for their unwavering support." He practiced adjusting his tie. "And I would like to thank the leadership at Logos Dynamics for recognizing real talent." I sat in my office listening to the audio bug I had planted in the living room years ago for security. Hearing him thank the leadership of Logos Dynamics was the ultimate irony. "You are welcome, Hunter," I whispered to the empty room. Mom was fussing over Dad, trying to squeeze him into a tuxedo that was a size too small. "Stand up straight, Arthur. We are sitting at the table of honor. We are going to be dining with billionaires. We have to show them that the Vances belong in this world. And thank God Jada won't be there to ruin the aesthetic. Can you imagine her showing up in those sneakers? It would be humiliating." Ebony laughed, applying a final layer of lipstick. "She is probably eating a microwave dinner in her apartment right now. I almost feel sorry for her." Almost. But hey, some people are born to be spectators, and some are born to be stars. They truly believed that excluding me was their victory. They had no idea that I had personally approved the seating chart. I had placed them at the most prominent table in the room, right in the center, under the brightest spotlight. Not to honor them, but to ensure that when the hammer fell, there would be no shadows for them to hide in. The sun began to set over Chicago, painting the sky in deep purples and oranges. The city was preparing for the night. My team was transforming the Ritz-Carlton ballroom into a palace of glass and light. And my family was putting on their costumes, unaware that they were dressing for their own execution. I stood up and walked to my private dressing room adjoining the office. Hanging on the rack was my outfit for the night. It wasn't a sequined gown, it was a white tailored power suit sharp enough to cut glass. Tonight, I wasn't dressing to impress them. I was dressing to dismiss them. I checked my phone one last time. The limousine had just arrived at my parents' house. The trap was full. The cage door was about to close. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what my mother would say. I was looking forward to leaving her speechless. While I was orchestrating the dismantling of a corrupt empire, my mother and sister were waging war on a sales assistant named Chloe. I knew this because I had access to the security feeds of every high-end retailer in the city, a perk of owning the logistics companies that delivered their merchandise. I watched the footage from my tablet, witnessing the sheer spectacle of their delusion. They were in the most exclusive bridal and evening wear boutique on Oak Street, a place where appointments were mandatory and silence was a luxury. But Ebony and Beatrice had stormed in like a hurricane of cheap perfume and entitlement, demanding immediate service. "This champagne is warm," Ebony snapped, shoving a crystal flute back at the terrifyingly patient assistant. "Take it away." I specifically asked for chilled Bollinger. "Do you know who I am? My husband is receiving the highest honor from Logos Dynamics tonight. We are practically royalty." Chloe, whose eyes looked tired, apologized softly. "I am so sorry, madam. Let me get you a fresh glass. And for the dress, we found the emerald gown you requested, but the rental deposit is quite steep." "Rental," Mom screeched, causing two other customers to look over in horror. "We are not renting. We are buying. My daughter does not wear used clothes. She is the wife of a future CEO. Put it on the tab. We will settle it later." I watched as Mom aggressively pulled a dress off the rack. It was a sequined monstrosity that sparkled under the halogen lights, loud and desperate, just like her. She held it up to Ebony. "Oh, honey, this is it. This screams money. When you walk into that gala, everyone will know you are the most important woman in the room. That little rat Jada is probably ironing her work uniform right now. Can you imagine? She is probably going to eat a frozen dinner while we dine on lobster." Ebony laughed, stepping into the changing room and throwing her coat on the floor for the assistant to pick up. I almost feel bad for her mom. Almost. It must be so hard to be so mediocre. But hey, at least she doesn't have the pressure of being us. Being this fabulous is a full-time job. They spent the next hour terrorizing the staff. They complained about the lighting. They complained about the music. They made the tailor pin and repin the hemline of Ebony's dress until the poor woman's fingers were bleeding. Every sentence out of their mouths was punctuated with the words chairman or Logos Dynamics. They were using my title, my company, and my reputation to bully service workers who earned in a month what Ebony spent on lunch. It was nauseating, but it was also perfect. The higher they climbed on their pedestal of arrogance, the harder they would fall when I kicked it out from underneath them. I closed the video feed. I had seen enough. The silence of my office was a welcome relief. I turned my chair back to my desk where the real preparation was happening. While they were worrying about sequins and hemlines, I was worrying about prison sentences and asset forfeiture. Spread out on my glass desk was the physical file on Hunter Vance. It was 3 inches thick. My forensic accountants had done a thorough job. Every illegal wire transfer, every faked invoice, every gambling debt paid with stolen corporate funds was documented, time-stamped, and verified. I picked up a red pen. It felt heavy in my hand like a weapon. I flipped to the page marked Personal Assets. Hunter had been clever, or so he thought. He had hidden money in offshore accounts in the Caymans, thinking the jurisdiction would protect him. He didn't realize that Logos Dynamics owned the bank he used. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus. "Execute the freeze," I said. "On everything," Jada Marcus asked. "Even the joint accounts with your sister." Everything, I confirmed. "The house, the cars, the checking accounts, the offshore funds. Leave them with nothing but the clothes on their backs. I want the cards to decline before the first course is served." "Done," Marcus said. "The writ of attachment has been filed. The moment Hunter steps onto that stage, he is technically bankrupt." I hung up. I looked at the file one last time. There was a photo of Hunter and Ebony on vacation in Cabo last year, paid for with money stolen from a widow's pension fund. They looked so happy, so carefree. I felt a twinge of sadness, not for them, but for the little girl inside me who used to worship her big sister. That little girl was gone now. She had died the moment Ebony slapped me. A soft chime from the elevator broke my concentration. The doors slid open, and a courier walked in carrying a long black garment bag. He placed it reverently on the sofa and bowed slightly before leaving. There were no sequins. There was no gold leaf. I unzipped the bag and let the fabric pool into my hands. It was a white tuxedo suit, custom tailored in Milan. The fabric was silk and wool structured yet fluid. It was stark clean and imposing. It was not a dress for a wife, it was a uniform for a commander. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The sun had set completely now. Chicago was a sea of glittering lights below me. Somewhere down there in the grid of traffic, a stretch Hummer was making its way toward the Ritz-Carlton. Inside, my family was drinking champagne, laughing, and rehearsing their victory speeches. They were driving toward a cliff, pressing the accelerator to the floor, convinced they were flying. I touched the cool glass of the window. I could see my reflection. I didn't look like the Jada they knew. I didn't look like the scapegoat. I looked like the storm that was about to make landfall. "Enjoy the ride, Mom," I whispered to the city below. "Because when you get to the destination, you are going to find out that the driver has locked the doors." I turned away from the window and pressed the intercom. "Sarah, have the car ready. And tell security to hold the perimeter. The chairman is coming down." It was time to go to the ball. But I wasn't going there to dance. I was going there to burn the house down. The entrance to the Ritz-Carlton was a chaotic symphony of flashing cameras and shouting paparazzi. A fleet of black luxury sedans was dropping off the titans of industry, the men and women who controlled the global supply chain. But amidst the understated elegance of the billionaires, a stretch Hummer pulled up to the curb, looking loud and out of place. It was the kind of vehicle people rented for prom, not for a corporate gala. The driver opened the door and out stepped Hunter. He smoothed his tuxedo jacket, inhaling the crisp night air as if he owned the sidewalk. He extended a hand to Ebony, who emerged in her emerald green sequined dress. The sequins caught the flash of a nearby camera, blindingly bright. She paused on the sidewalk, posing for photographers who were actually aiming at the senator standing behind her, but she didn't care. In her mind, every lens was focused on her. My parents followed, looking stiff and uncomfortable in their rented finery. Mom was clutching her clutch so tightly her knuckles were white, scanning the crowd to see who was watching. "Look at this, Arthur," she whispered loudly to my father. "This is where we belong. Finally." Hunter led the way toward the grand ballroom entrance, walking with a swagger that bordered on comical. He nodded to people who didn't know him, waved at executives who looked confused, and marched up the red carpet like he was accepting an Oscar. "Come on, everyone," he called back to the family. "Do not keep the admirers waiting." I was standing near the velvet ropes at the main checkpoint. I wasn't wearing a headset or holding a clipboard, but in the chaos of the entrance, my stillness made me look like staff. I was actually giving final instructions to the head of security via a small earpiece, ensuring that the federal agents were in position inside the ballroom. Hunter spotted me first. He stopped dead in his tracks, causing a pileup as my parents bumped into him. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He nudged Ebony. "Look, would you look at that?" Ebony squinted, then let out a shriek of laughter that turned heads. "Oh my God. You have got to be kidding me." "Jada." She strutted over to me, her dress swishing noisily. "I knew it. I knew you would be here. But I thought you would be scrubbing toilets in the back. Working the door. Really? This is a new low even for you." Mom hurried over, her face a mask of horror. She looked around frantically to see if anyone had noticed the connection. "Jada, what are you doing here?" she hissed. "You are embarrassing us. People are going to think we are related to the help." I looked at them. They looked like peacocks in a room full of eagles, loud, colorful, and completely defenseless. "I am working, Mother," I said simply. "Just like you told me to." Hunter stepped forward, invading my personal space. He looked me up and down, taking in my white suit. "Nice outfit. Did you rent that from a waiter supply shop? It fits okay, I guess. A little masculine for a lady, but beggars cannot be choosers." He turned to the security guard standing next to me. "Excuse me, my good man. We are VIPs. Honorees, actually. Please make sure this woman checks our coats properly. We do not want anything stolen. You know how these people are." The security guard, who knew exactly who I was, stiffened. He started to reach for his radio, but I made a subtle motion with my hand. Stand down. Let them play. Ebony leaned in close, her breath smelling of cheap mints and expensive champagne. Do us a favor, Jada. When we get inside, stay away from our table. I do not want you refilling my water glass. I do not want you clearing my plate. Just pretend you do not know us. It is better for everyone. I looked her in the eye. Don't worry, Ebony. After tonight, pretending I don't know, you will be the easiest thing in the world. She rolled her eyes. So dramatic. Whatever. Just move the rope. You are blocking the entrance for important people. I unhooked the velvet rope, stepping aside to let them pass. It was a symbolic gesture. I was opening the door to their destruction, and they were walking through it with smiles on their faces. As Hunter walked past me, he paused. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. He shoved it into the breast pocket of my custom-tailored Italian suit. Here, he said with a wink, for your trouble. Buy yourself a sandwich or something. And hey, if you see a bottle of Dom Perignon back there, sneak it over to table 4. I will give you another 5. He patted my shoulder, a condescending tap that made my skin crawl. Then he walked into the golden light of the ballroom, laughing with my father. That is charity, Arthur, he boomed, helping the less fortunate. I stood there for a moment, feeling the rough texture of the cheap bill against the silk of my suit. I pulled it out and looked at it. Abraham Lincoln looked back at me, unimpressed. I turned to the security guard. Captain? Yes, Madam Chairwoman. Ensure the doors are locked once all guests are inside, and tell the FBI team to hold their position until my signal. Yes, madam. I dropped the $5 bill into the tip jar of the coat check girl standing nearby. Keep it, I told her. It is the last money he is ever going to spend. I straightened my jacket and walked toward the ballroom. The flashbulbs erupted again, but this time they were not for the imposters. They were for the executioner. And I was ready to swing the axe. The inside of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom was not just a room. It was a cathedral of capitalism, a sprawling expanse of gold leaf ceilings, velvet drapery, and crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen fireworks above the heads of Chicago's elite. The air smelled of expensive perfume-aged cognac and the kind of old money that does not need to shout to be heard. But my family did not understand the language of old money. They only knew how to scream. An usher in white gloves led them through the maze of round tables past senators, tech moguls, and shipping magnates. My mother, Beatrice, walked with her chin held so high she nearly tripped over the hem of her sequined dress. She clutched my father's arm, whispering aggressively, "Do you see who that is, Arthur? That is the governor. And over there, isn't that the owner of the Bears? Act natural. Act like we have dinner with them every Tuesday." When the usher stopped at table 4, right in the center of the room directly in front of the stage, my family nearly fainted with delight. It was the best seat in the house. A round table draped in heavy white linen set with silver cutlery that gleamed under the spotlight. The centerpiece was a tower of white orchids that probably cost more than my parents' mortgage payment. Ebony pulled out her chair and sat down immediately, taking a selfie with the stage in the background. "Oh my God," she squealed. "We are literally front row. Hunter, look at this view. Everyone in the room has to look at us to see the stage. We are practically the stars of the show." Hunter sat down and unbuttoned his jacket, looking around with a smug satisfaction that made my stomach turn as I watched from the monitoring booth in the wings. He snapped his fingers at a passing waiter. "Champagne, the good stuff, and keep it coming. My throat is parched from all this winning." My mother leaned in, her eyes wide. "This is it. This is the life Jada tried to tell us we couldn't afford." Poor girl. If she could see us now sitting here while she is probably eating instant noodles in her studio apartment, she would die of envy. It is tragic, really. She just never had the pedigree for this world. The other seats at table 4 were occupied by 3 men in sharp gray suits. Hunter, assuming they were just fellow admirers of his genius, immediately launched into his performance. He extended a hand to the man on his right, a silver-haired gentleman with eyes like flint. Hunter Vance Hunter announced loudly. Top earner at Hunter Motors. Soon to be regional director if the rumors are true. And you are. The man shook his hand firmly. Sterling. I work in acquisitions. Acquisitions? Hunter laughed, slapping the man on the back. Boring stuff, huh? Just pushing paper. See, I am in sales. I am on the front lines. I am the rainmaker. You corporate guys in your ivory towers, you don't understand the thrill of the hunt. You don't understand how to look a client in the eye and make him believe he needs a car he cannot afford. That is an art form. Mr. Sterling smiled a thin, dangerous smile that Hunter was too drunk on ego to read. Is that so? You make them buy what they cannot afford. Absolutely, Hunter bragged, taking a gulp of champagne. It is all about psychology. You sell them the dream. You tell them the car will make them respected, will make them powerful. People are sheep, Mr. Sterling. They want to be led. Take my in-laws here. Great people, simple people. But they need guidance. I guide them to the best investments, the best cars. I carry the weight of this family on my shoulders because, let's be honest, nobody else has the vision. Ebony beamed, resting her head on his shoulder. He is so humble, but it is true. My sister, for example, she is hopeless. Zero ambition. She actually works in logistics or something dull like that. Probably packs boxes in a warehouse. Hunter tries to help her, but some people just want to be bottom feeders. Mr. Sterling glanced at the other two men at the table. They exchanged a subtle look. A look that said the target has confirmed his own guilt. I see, Sterling said quietly. So you believe leadership is about manipulation? Hunter winked. It is about control, my friend. And tonight, Logos Dynamics is going to recognize that. They know a shark when they see one. They know that to run a region, you need a killer instinct. That is why I am sitting here, and the other dealership managers are sitting back there near the toilets. He laughed at his own joke, and my parents joined in a chorus of sycophants echoing their master. They ate the caviar without tasting it. They drank the wine without savoring it. They were consuming the moment with a ravenous hunger, trying to fill the empty void where their integrity used to be. Suddenly, the house lights dimmed. The chatter in the ballroom died down instantly, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. A single intense spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the podium on the stage. The music swelled, a dramatic orchestral piece that vibrated in the floorboards. My family straightened up. Hunter fixed his tie, wiping a smudge of caviar from his lip. This is it, he whispered. Showtime. Mama, get your camera ready. You are going to want to record my walk to the stage. A deep voice boomed over the speaker system, echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, partners and shareholders, welcome to the inaugural gala of the new Logos Dynamics. The crowd applauded politely. My parents clapped the loudest, trying to be noticed. The voice continued. For years, our company has operated in the shadows, moving the world without seeking the spotlight. We have built an infrastructure that powers nations. But tonight, we step into the light. Tonight, we reveal the vision behind the victory. Hunter nudged Ebony. He is talking about me. Vision behind the victory. That is my slogan. I used that in a sales meeting last month. They must have heard it. Please join me, the announcer said, his voice rising in a crescendo in welcoming the architect of this empire. The person who built this $3.2 billion conglomerate from a single laptop in a studio apartment. My mother frowned. Studio apartment. That sounds like... She trailed off, shaking her head. No, impossible. The announcer continued. She is a visionary who values silence over noise, results over rhetoric, and integrity over image. She is the unseen force that drives our industry. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the founder and CEO of Logos Dynamics. The spotlight moved from the podium to the velvet curtain at the back of the stage. The music reached a fever pitch. The entire room stood up in a wave of rustling silk and wool. My family stood up too, simply because everyone else was doing it. They craned their necks, desperate to see the billionaire who was about to validate their existence. Hunter whispered to Mr. Sterling. Watch this. I bet it is some old guy I played golf with. I have connections everywhere. The velvet curtains parted slowly. The announcer's voice thundered one last time. Please welcome the most powerful woman in modern transportation, Ms. Jada Vance. The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. At table 4 time seemed to stop. The smile slid off Hunter's face like sludge. My mother's hands went limp, dropping her expensive clutch onto the floor with a dull thud. Ebony froze her mouth slightly open, her eyes bulging as if the pressure in her head was about to explode. They didn't breathe. They didn't blink. They just stared into the darkness of the stage, waiting for the punchline of a joke they didn't understand. But there was no joke. There was only me. And I was walking into the light. The heavy velvet curtains parted with a slow, deliberate grace, revealing the center stage. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the blinding white intensity of the spotlight cutting through the darkness. Then I stepped forward. I did not rush. I did not hesitate. I walked with the rhythmic, measured pace of a woman who owns the very ground beneath her feet. My white custom-tailored suit caught the light, making me glow against the pitch-black background. I looked out into the cavernous ballroom, a sea of 500 faces turned upward in anticipation. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was not the polite silence of an audience waiting for a speech. It was the shocked, suffocating silence of a collective gasp. I could see the confusion rippling through the front rows. They knew the name Jada Vance, the titan of industry they had come to worship. But they did not know the face. And for the few people who did know the face specifically, the 4 people sitting at table 4, the cognitive dissonance was shattering their reality in real time. I walked to the glass podium in the center of the stage. I placed my hands on either side of it, leaning forward slightly to look directly into the camera lens that was broadcasting my face to the giant LED screens flanking the stage. I let the silence stretch. I let it hang in the air for 5, 10, 15 seconds. I wanted them to look. I wanted them to really see me. Not Jada the scapegoat, not Jada the failure, but Jada the architect. From my vantage point, I had a perfect view of table 4. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. The reaction was visceral, immediate, and catastrophic. Ebony was the first to break. She had been holding a crystal goblet of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon, halfway to her lips, frozen in a pose of feigned sophistication. As her brain finally processed that the woman on stage, the billionaire CEO, was the same sister she had slapped the night before her motor functions failed, her hand went limp. The glass slipped from her fingers. It didn't just fall. It shattered against the edge of the table, exploding in a spray of dark red liquid. The wine splashed across the front of her white tablecloth, and more importantly, all over the front of her emerald sequined dress. The dress she had leveraged her future to rent. The dark stains spread across her chest like a gunshot wound, ruining the fabric instantly. But Ebony didn't move. She didn't gasp. She didn't try to wipe it off. She just sat there staring at me with her mouth hanging open, the wine dripping onto her lap, completely paralyzed by the impossibility of what she was seeing. Next to her, my mother, Beatrice, looked as if she were having a stroke. Her eyes were bulging so far out of her head I thought they might pop. Her face, usually so composed and painted with disdain, was twisted into a mask of grotesque shock. She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white, her long manicured nails digging into the linen. She was mouthing my name over and over again, but no sound was coming out. Jada, Jada, Jada. It was a silent prayer to a god she had spent her life mocking. But the most satisfying reaction belonged to Hunter. The color didn't just drain from his face, it vanished, leaving him looking like a wax figure melting under the heat of the spotlight. He wasn't looking at me with shock. He was looking at me with terror. Pure, unadulterated terror. He was doing the math in his head. The insults, the $5 bill he had shoved in my pocket, the phone call where he called me the help, the stolen money, the fraud. He realized in that split second that the person holding the microphone held his entire life in the palm of her hand. He slumped in his chair, looking small, weak, and defeated before I had even spoken a single word. I leaned into the microphone. My voice, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system, was rich, clear, and steady. "Good evening," I said. The sound of my voice seemed to snap the room out of its trance. A few people clapped nervously, but most just watched mesmerized. I scanned the room, making eye contact with the senators and the bankers, before letting my gaze settle heavily, permanently on table 4. "Many of you know Logos Dynamics as a company that operates in the dark," I began. "We move the things you need when you need them without you ever seeing how it is done. We value discretion. We value results. But recently I was reminded that sometimes silence is mistaken for weakness." I saw Hunter flinch. He knew exactly who I was talking to. I paused, letting the words sink in. "There is a story I want to share with you tonight. A personal story. It is about perception versus reality." I took the $5 bill out of my breast pocket. I held it up. The camera zoomed in on it, projecting the crumpled image of Lincoln onto the massive screens behind me. Tonight, on my way into this ballroom, a man handed me this $5 bill. I said, my tone conversational but deadly. He thought I was the coat check girl. He told me to buy myself a sandwich. He told me that I looked like I didn't belong here. A murmur of outrage rippled through the crowd. Who would dare insult Jada Vance at her own gala? I smoothed the bill out on the podium. That man is sitting in the front row tonight. He is a man who believes that net worth is determined by the loudness of your voice and the shininess of your car. He believes that because I choose to walk, I must be lost. Because I choose to listen, I must be stupid. I looked directly at Hunter. His eyes were wide, pleading with me to stop, pleading for mercy, but I had run out of mercy years ago. Someone once told me, quite recently in fact, that I would never own a car, I said, quoting his words back to him. They mocked me for taking the bus. They mocked me for my sneakers. They told me I was destined to be a pedestrian in a world of drivers. I smiled, a cold, sharp smile that didn't reach my eyes. And they were right. I do not own a car. I have never seen the point in owning a single vehicle. I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. The lights in the ballroom changed. The massive LED screen behind me, which had been displaying the elegant gold logo of Logos Dynamics, suddenly shifted. It turned into a high-resolution map of the world. Then it zoomed in on North America. Then Chicago. "But I do not need to own a car," I continued, my voice rising in power. "Because I own the road. I own the logistics network that delivers the fuel. I own the shipping containers that carry the parts. And as of 7:00 p.m. last night, I own the very dealerships where those cars are sold." The screen flashed red. A graphic appeared. It showed the logo of Hunter Motors, the company my brother-in-law worked for, the company he bragged about. Then a massive animated Logos Dynamics logo slammed down on top of it, crushing it into dust. The words "acquisition complete" flashed across the screen in bold, undeniable letters. The crowd gasped. Whispers broke out instantly. Did she just buy a dealership chain to prove a point? I watched Hunter. He didn't just slump now. He buried his face in his hands. "So to the people who told me to get out of their house because I didn't have a title," I said, looking straight at my mother. "To the people who told me I was nothing, I have a message for you. You were playing checkers. I was playing chess. And the game is over. Checkmate." The applause died down slowly, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence as I remained standing at the podium. I did not step back to accept the adulation. I did not smile to acknowledge the applause. Instead, I leaned closer to the microphone, my expression shifting from triumphant to lethal. The air in the room grew cold, as if the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in a single second. However, I said, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings, "Building a legacy is not just about acquisition. It is about maintenance. It is about identifying rot within the structure and cutting it out before it spreads. Tonight is not just a celebration of new ownership. It is an operation of sanitation. We are cleaning house." I paused, letting the words hang there. I saw Hunter shift in his chair, his eyes darting toward the exit signs. He knew. In his gut, he knew. We discovered a discrepancy during our due diligence. I continued keeping my eyes locked on table 4. One of our newly acquired branches has been bleeding capital. Not because of poor market conditions, not because of bad inventory, but because of theft. Systematic, arrogant, and sloppy theft. $5 million. That is the amount that has been siphoned off from customer deposits and operational funds over the last 3 years. A gasp rippled through the crowd. $5 million was not a rounding error. It was a felony. My mother Beatrice looked at Hunter. For the first time, her blind adoration cracked. "Hunter," she whispered loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "What is she talking about? Tell her she is wrong." Hunter didn't answer. He was too busy trying to figure out if he could outrun the security team stationed at the doors. I pressed the button on my remote. The massive LED screen behind me shifted again. The map of the Logos Dynamics empire vanished. In its place appeared a series of documents blown up to the size of billboards. They were bank statements, wire transfers, emails. And right in the center of every document was a signature. Hunter Vance. The screen cycled through the evidence with ruthless precision. It showed a transfer of $50,000 to a known offshore gambling site. It showed a $20,000 withdrawal from the widow Mrs. Higgins' deposit account aimed directly at a shell company registered in Hunter's name. It showed the purchase of the Porsche Cayenne he had driven to my parents' house paid for with funds earmarked for employee payroll. "This is not accounting," I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "This is embezzlement. This is fraud. And it was committed by a man who stood in my parents' living room yesterday and called me a failure because I refused to help him cover his tracks." Hunter jumped up from his chair. The movement was so violent it knocked his chair backward with a loud crash. He looked wild, like a trapped animal. "That is a lie," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the stage. "She doctored those. She is crazy. She has always been jealous of me. Do not listen to her." "Sit down, Mr. Vance," I said calmly. "I will not sit down," he yelled, looking around for support. But the men at his table, the ones he had been bragging to earlier, were now looking at him with undisguised disgust. Mr. Sterling, the man from acquisitions, slowly moved his wineglass away from Hunter as if dishonesty were a contagious disease. Hunter turned and ran. He shoved my father out of the way, not caring that the old man nearly fell to the floor. He scrambled toward the double doors at the back of the ballroom, his tuxedo tails flapping behind him. He pushed past a waiter, sending a tray of champagne flutes crashing to the ground. "Out of my way," he screamed. "I am leaving! You cannot keep me here!" But he didn't make it far. As he reached the main exit, the doors swung open. But it wasn't to let him out. It was to let the consequences in. 4 federal agents wearing navy blue windbreakers with the letters FBI emblazoned in yellow on the back stepped into the ballroom. They were flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. They moved with the heavy, inevitable momentum of a freight train. Hunter skid to a halt, his dress shoes sliding on the polished floor. He looked back at the stage, then at the agents, then at the side exits. But my security team had already blocked every door. He was boxed in. Hunter Vance, the lead agent, announced, his voice booming without a microphone. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Put your hands in the air." "No," Hunter whimpered. "This is a mistake. I am the regional director. I am an honoree. Look at the invitation." The agents didn't care about the invitation. They grabbed his arms, spinning him around. Hunter struggled, kicking and thrashing, all of his false dignity stripping away in an instant. They forced him face down onto the carpet, the same carpet he had walked across with such arrogance only an hour ago. My mother screamed. It was a high, piercing sound of denial. "No, don't touch him. He is a good boy. He is innocent. Jada, tell them. Tell them to stop." I watched from the stage, my face impassive. I didn't say a word. I let the scene play out. I let the sound of the handcuffs clicking shut echo through the silent room. That metallic click was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The agents hauled Hunter to his feet. His hair was messed up, his tie was crooked, and his face was pressed against the floor a moment ago. He looked pathetic. As they dragged him toward the exit, he locked eyes with me. "You witch," he screamed, spitting the words out. "You set me up. You planned this whole thing. You invited me here just to humiliate me. You entrapped me." I signaled for the sound technician to cut the music completely. I wanted him to hear me. I wanted everyone to hear me. "I didn't set you up, Hunter," I said into the microphone. I simply turned on the lights. "You are the one who decided to steal. You are the one who decided to gamble. And you are the one who decided to underestimate the woman you called the help." I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at him as the agents paused to let me finish. "You told me I was digging for scraps," I said softly. "But the truth is, Hunter, you were the one holding the shovel. You dug this grave yourself, dollar by stolen dollar. I just provided the tombstone." Hunter opened his mouth to scream again, but the agents shoved him forward, marching him out of the ballroom. The flashbulbs from the press pit went wild, capturing every moment of his disgrace. He was dragged out into the night, leaving behind a ruined gala, a shattered family, and a bill that was finally coming due. I looked at table 4. My sister was sobbing into her ruined dress. My father was staring at his hands. My mother was looking at the empty doorway where her golden boy had just vanished. I turned back to the audience, who were still staring in shock. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, smoothing my jacket. "But at Logos Dynamics, we believe in transparency. Now please enjoy the dessert. It is sweet. But I promise you not nearly as sweet as justice." I walked off the stage and into the dim quiet of the backstage wings. The roar of the crowd was fading behind me, replaced by the frantic scurrying of event staff and the hum of equipment. My assistant Sarah was waiting with a bottle of water. I took a sip, the cool liquid soothing my throat. I felt calm. The kind of calm that comes after a violent storm has finally passed. But the silence did not last long. I heard the sound of high heels clicking frantically against the concrete floor, followed by the heavy breathing of people who were not used to running. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The smell of fear and desperation arrived before they did. "Jada. Jada, wait." It was my mother, Beatrice. She burst through the security curtain, her face streaked with tears and running mascara. She looked nothing like the arrogant woman who had sat at table 4 an hour ago. She looked old, frail, and terrified. My sister Ebony was right behind her, holding the front of her wine-stained dress, her eyes red and swollen. Mom threw herself at me, grabbing my arms with a grip that was meant to be affectionate, but felt like claws. "Jada, thank God we found you. You have to stop them. You have to tell them to bring him back." I gently but firmly removed her hands from my jacket. I stepped back, creating a physical barrier between us. "Stop who, Beatrice?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. "The FBI," she sobbed, wringing her hands. "They took Hunter. They dragged him out like a common criminal." "Jada, you can't let them do this. He is family. He is your brother-in-law." "It is all just a big misunderstanding. I am sure he can explain the accounts. He is a businessman. Sometimes numbers get mixed up." "A misunderstanding," I repeated. "He stole $5 million, Mother. There is no misunderstanding. There is only math. And the math says he is a thief." Beatrice shook her head violently. "No, no. He is a good man. He loves Ebony. He takes care of us." "Jada, look at your sister. Look at what you are doing to her. She is pregnant. She didn't tell anyone yet, but she is. You can't send the father of her child to prison." I looked at Ebony. She wasn't pregnant. I knew that because I had seen her drinking wine all night. It was just another lie. Another desperate manipulation tactic to play on my sympathy. But my sympathy tank was empty. Ebony pushed past Mom and threw herself onto the floor. She didn't just crouch. She fell to her knees, disregarding the expensive dress she had ruined. She grabbed the hem of my pants, looking up at me with eyes that were pleading, yet still held a flicker of entitlement. Jada, please, Ebony begged, her voice cracking. You have so much money now. I saw the screen. $3 billion. You are rich. You are filthy rich. You could fix this with a phone call. You could write a check and make the charges go away. I looked down at her. The golden child. The sister who had pushed me down mocked me and slapped me. Now she was on her knees begging the scapegoat for salvation. Get up, Ebony, I said. You look pathetic. I won't get up until you promise to help, she cried, tightening her grip on my leg. Just pay the $5 million back to the company. It is your company now, right? You can just say it was a loan. You can say you authorized it. Please, Jada. If Hunter goes to jail, I have nothing. They freeze the accounts. My cards aren't working. I can't even get a taxi home. I felt a surge of disgust. Even now, in her darkest moment, she wasn't worried about Hunter's soul. She wasn't worried about the widow he stole from. She was worried about her credit cards. She was worried about her lifestyle. I pulled my leg away, forcing her to fall forward onto her hands. You are asking me to obstruct justice, I said. You are asking me to become an accessory to a felony just so you can keep pretending to be a socialite. I am your sister, she screamed, slamming her fist on the floor. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means we share DNA, I said coldly. It doesn't mean we share a bank account. Mom stepped forward again, her face twisting from sorrow to anger. How can you be so cruel? We raised you. We fed you. Is this how you repay us? By destroying our lives, by leaving your sister destitute. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Destitute, I asked. Is that what you are worried about? Yes, Mom snapped. Hunter was the provider. Without his income, how is Ebony supposed to live? How are we supposed to pay the mortgage? I looked at them both. This was the moment. The final nail in the coffin. You don't have to worry about the mortgage anymore, Beatrice, I said softly. Mom blinked, looking confused. What do you mean? I mean you don't have a mortgage, I said. Because as of this morning, the bank foreclosed on your house. The color drained from my mother's face. Foreclosed. That is impossible. We have never missed a payment. Hunter said he was handling the refinancing. Hunter lied, I said. But that is not the worst part. Do you remember 3 months ago when Ebony needed bail money for that DUI she told you was a parking ticket? And then she needed money for the down payment on the Hummer. You co-signed a second mortgage on the house to give her the cash. Mom looked at Ebony. Ebony looked away. Well, I continued. Hunter stopped paying that second mortgage 6 months ago. The debt was sold to a collection agency. And then that agency was acquired by a holding company. I took a step closer to them, leaning in so they could see the truth in my eyes. My holding company, Mother. I own the note on your house. I own the debt. And since you are in default, I exercised my right to foreclose. No, Mom whispered, backing away until she hit the wall. You wouldn't. You can't. That is our home. That is where we raised you. That is where you abused me, I corrected. That is where you told me I was worthless. That is where you told me to leave and never come back. Well, now it is my turn. I checked my watch. It is 10:00 p.m. The eviction notice was posted on your front door an hour ago. My lawyers will be there at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow with the sheriff to change the locks. You have tonight to pack whatever you can fit into that rental limousine. Ebony let out a wail of despair, burying her face in her hands. Mom slid down the wall, collapsing into a heap of sequins and regret. Jada, please, Mom whispered, her voice barely audible. Where will we go? I looked at them one last time. I felt nothing. No hate, no love, just the clinical satisfaction of a job finished. I heard the bus stop on 5th Street has a bench, I said, turning to walk away. It is reliable, and it is free. I walked back toward the stage door, signaling Sarah to call my car. Behind me, the sound of their weeping faded into the background noise of the ventilation system. They were just ghosts now, and I had a plane to catch. The heavy steel doors of the Ritz-Carlton slammed shut behind us, cutting off the warmth, the music, and the golden light of the gala. The silence of the night was immediate and brutal, broken only by the sound of the wind howling through the downtown skyscrapers. It was a poetic kind of justice that the weather had decided to repeat itself. Just 24 hours ago, I had walked to my parents' house in a blizzard, shivering in my thin coat while they sat by the fire. Now the snow was falling again, thick, wet flakes that stuck to eyelashes and melted against skin. But this time, I was the one wearing the cashmere wool coat over my Italian suit. My family, however, was shivering in the freezing cold. My mother Beatrice hugged her bare arms, her sequined dress offering absolutely zero protection against the Chicago winter. Ebony was still sobbing, her makeup running down her face in black streaks, her ruined dress flapping in the wind. My father Arthur looked small and shrunken in his ill-fitting rental tuxedo. They stood on the sidewalk looking frantically up and down the street. The stretch Hummer they had rented to make their grand entrance was gone. The rental period had expired an hour ago, and the driver, unpaid for the overtime, had simply driven away. There were no taxis, no Ubers, just the empty snow-covered street and the harsh glare of the streetlights. "Where is the car?" Mom shrieked, her teeth chattering violently. "Arthur, call the driver. Tell him to come back. We cannot stand out here. We will freeze to death." Dad patted his pockets, frantically pulling out his phone. He dialed a number, listened for a moment, and then lowered the phone slowly. "He blocked me." Dad whispered, his voice trembling with shock. "The driver blocked my number." They turned to look at the valet stand. A line of warm, luxurious cars was waiting for the other guests. Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, Mercedes. But none of them belonged to the Vances. They were stranded in the cold, exposed, and vulnerable, exactly as I had been for most of my adult life. I stood at the top of the wide stone staircase leading down to the driveway. The overhang protected me from the snow. I looked down at them, watching them huddled together for warmth. It was a pathetic sight. The lions who had roared so loudly at the dinner table were now just wet, shivering stray cats. "Jada," Mom cried out, spotting me. "Jada, please, let us into your car. Just drop us off at a hotel. Any hotel. We can't stay out here." I didn't answer. I just watched the snow accumulate on their expensive, unpaid-for hairstyles. "Arthur, do something," Mom hissed, shoving my father forward. "Talk to her. She is your daughter. She has to listen to you." My father straightened his spine. He tried to summon the ghost of the authority he used to wield over me. He walked to the bottom of the stairs, looking up at me. His face was red from the cold and the humiliation, but his eyes still held that stubborn, foolish pride. "Jada," he boomed, trying to make his voice sound commanding over the wind. "I am speaking to you as your father. This has gone on long enough. You have made your point. You have embarrassed us. You have ruined your sister's night. Now I am ordering you to stop this nonsense." I tilted my head, looking at him with mild curiosity. "You are ordering me?" I asked. "Yes," he said, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I am the head of this family. I demand that you call off the lawyers. I demand that you fix this mess with the bank. And I demand that you provide us with transportation immediately. You are tearing this family apart, Jada. You are destroying everything we built." He took a breath, his voice cracking. "We are your blood. How can you stand there and watch us suffer? How can you be so cold? You are breaking your mother's heart. You are destroying the sanctity of this family unit." I looked at him. Really looked at him. For years his voice had terrified me. His disapproval had been a weight I dragged around every single day. I had spent decades trying to earn a nod, a smile, a single word of praise from this man. I had let him belittle my career, mock my choices, and treat me like a second-class citizen in my own home, all because I desperately wanted him to be my dad. But standing there in the snow, I realized something that made me feel lighter than air. He wasn't a patriarch. He was just a bully who had lost his victim. And without a victim, he was nothing. I took one step down the stairs. The sound of my heel hitting the stone was sharp and clear. "You talk about family as if it is a shield, Dad. I said, my voice cutting through the wind. You use that word to demand loyalty, to demand money, to demand silence, but you never used it to give love. I took another step down. You say I am destroying this family. But let me ask you a question. Where was this family 10 years ago when I was eating ramen noodles in the dark because I sent you my rent money to pay for Ebony's credit card debt? Dad opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. Where was this family when I walked 3 miles in the snow to Christmas dinner because you told me there was no room in the car? Where was this family when I was in the hospital with pneumonia and you didn't visit because you were too busy vacationing with Hunter? I stood directly above him now, looking down into his watery, fearful eyes. You asked me where I was when you needed help. I was right there. I was always there. I was the one cleaning up the messes. I was the one paying the bills in secret. I was the one taking the abuse so you could feel superior. I gestured to the shivering figures of Mom and Ebony behind him. That is not a family, Arthur. That is a cult. And I was the sacrifice. But Jada? He stammered, his bravado crumbling. We are your parents. Being a parent is a verb, not a noun, I said coldly. It requires action. It requires protection. You didn't protect me. You fed me to the wolves because you liked the way they smiled at you. I looked past him at my mother. She was weeping openly now. But I knew she wasn't crying for me. She was crying for the loss of her house, her status, and her comfort. You said this family died tonight. I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. You are wrong. This family died 10 years ago. Tonight is just the funeral. And frankly, I think I have mourned long enough. I turned my back on them. It was the hardest and easiest thing I had ever done. Jada. Dad shouted, his voice breaking. If you walk away now, don't you dare come back. Do you hear me? You will be alone. I paused on the top step. I looked out at the city of Chicago, my city glowing in the distance. My car, a sleek black armored sedan, pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out and opened the door. I am not alone, Dad, I said without turning around. I have $3 billion. I have a company that runs the world. And most importantly, I have the truth. I stepped into the warm leather interior of the car. Drive, I told the driver. As the car pulled away, I didn't look out the window. I didn't watch them shrinking in the rearview mirror. I opened my laptop and started working. There were shipping routes to optimize. There was a future to build, and I finally had the space to build it. The private elevator ride to the rooftop of the Logos Dynamics Tower took exactly 45 seconds. In that short amount of time, I traveled from the cold, gritty reality of the street level where my family was currently freezing to the rarefied air of the gods. As the numbers on the digital display climbed higher, I felt the heavy, invisible coat of guilt I had worn for decades sliding off my shoulders. With every floor we passed, I became lighter. By the time the heavy steel doors slid open, I felt weightless. The wind on the helipad was fierce, whipping my white trouser suit around my legs and stinging my cheeks. But after the emotional storm I had just navigated, the physical gale felt cleansing. It felt like the world was applauding. In the center of the landing pad, my personal helicopter, a sleek black Sikorsky, was waiting. Its rotor blades were already spinning, cutting through the night air with a rhythmic thumping sound that vibrated deep in my chest. It was a sound of power, a sound of capability, a machine that existed solely to lift me above the chaos. I walked toward the aircraft, my head held high. My assistant Sarah, who had come up in the service elevator with my luggage, jogged over to me. She had to shout to be heard over the roar of the engine. She looked worried, holding my personal cell phone out to me like it was a live grenade. "Madam," she yelled, shielding her eyes from the downdraft. "It is your mother again. She has called 6 times in the last 3 minutes. She says it is an emergency. She says they are freezing. She is demanding to speak to you." I stopped walking. I looked at the phone in Sarah's hand. The screen was lit up, flashing the word Mom, along with a picture I had taken of her years ago. In the photo, she was smiling, but not at me. She was looking past the camera, probably at Ebony. Even in my own contacts list, I was invisible to her. I reached out and took the phone. The vibration of the ringing felt like an angry heartbeat against my palm. I stared at it for a long moment. For 32 years, this device had been a leash. It was how they summoned me to fix their problems. It was how they delivered their insults. It was how they kept me tethered to their dysfunction. Every ring was a demand. Every text was a criticism. Sarah watched me, waiting for me to answer. She expected me to cave. She expected me to yell or to cry or to give one last explanation. But I had run out of words. I walked to the edge of the roof. The safety railing was waist high. I looked down. 50 stories below the city of Chicago was a sprawling grid of amber and white lights. Somewhere down there in the dark canyon of the street were 4 people who had shared my last name. They were probably still arguing. Mom was probably blaming Dad. Ebony was probably blaming the world. They were small, so incredibly small. The phone continued to ring in my hand. It was a desperate, shrill plea for attention. I didn't swipe to answer. I didn't press decline. I didn't even turn it off. I simply opened my hand. For a split second, the phone hovered in the air, suspended by the wind. Then gravity claimed it. I watched as the lighted screen tumbled end over end, falling into the abyss. It became a tiny speck of light spinning down, 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 until it vanished completely into the darkness of the city. The connection was severed, not just the call, but the obligation, the guilt, the need for approval. It was all gone, falling 50 floors to shatter on the pavement alongside their expectations. I turned back to Sarah. Her eyes were wide. "I think I lost the signal," I shouted over the wind, a small smile playing on my lips. Sarah stared at me for a second, and then she smiled back. A genuine smile of understanding. She nodded. I walked to the helicopter and climbed into the cabin. The interior was lined with cream-colored leather and smelled of success. The door sealed shut with a heavy thud, instantly silencing the roar of the wind and the rotors. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was safe. I buckled my harness and put on the noise-canceling headset. The pilot, a former Air Force captain named David, who had been with me since the startup days, turned around in his seat. "Good evening, Madam Chairwoman." His voice came through the headset, crystal clear and calm. "Rough night." "You have no idea, David," I replied, leaning back into the soft leather seat. He checked his instrument panel, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Flight plan is filed. We are cleared for takeoff. Heading home to the penthouse, ma'am." I looked out the window as the helicopter began to lift off. The sensation of rising was intoxicating. The Ritz-Carlton, the scene of my greatest pain and my greatest victory, began to shrink beneath us. I could see the tiny dots of cars on the street. I could see the snow covering the rooftops. I imagined my family down there, looking up at the sky, hearing the sound of the chopper, and realizing that the sound was me leaving them behind. Home, I thought. The penthouse was beautiful, yes. But it was in Chicago. It was in the same city as the ghosts of my past. Suddenly, the idea of going back there, of being anywhere near the toxicity I had just escaped, felt impossible. I didn't want to be in the same zip code as them. I didn't even want to be in the same time zone. "No, David," I said into the microphone. "Cancel the flight plan to the penthouse." David paused, his hand hovering over the controls. "Change of destination, ma'am. Where to?" I looked at the horizon. The night sky was endless, vast, and full of stars that were usually hidden by the city lights. But up here, I could see them all. The world was huge, and for the first time in my life, I was free to explore it without asking for permission. "Take us to O'Hare Private Terminal," I said. "Have the Gulfstream fueled and ready for immediate departure." "Copy that," David said, banking the helicopter smoothly to the left. "The private jet." "And what is the destination for the jet, ma'am?" I thought about the painting that hung in my office, a watercolor of the Seine at twilight. I had bought it years ago as a promise to myself. A promise that one day I would go to a place where nobody knew my name, where nobody knew my history, and where I could just be Jada. Paris, I said. Paris, France. David asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. Yes, I said, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold as we accelerated. It is Fashion Week. I hear the spring collection is beautiful this time of year. And David, tell the flight attendant to open a bottle of vintage champagne. I have something to celebrate. As the helicopter climbed higher, leaving the skyline of Chicago behind, I took a deep breath, my lungs filled with cool, recycled air, but it tasted sweeter than anything I had ever known. I looked down one last time. The city was just a glowing patch on the dark earth now. My parents, my sister Hunter, the house, the debts, the insults, the slap. They were all gone. They were microscopic. They were yesterday. I turned my head forward, looking into the darkness that lay ahead. It wasn't empty. It was a canvas. And for the first time, I held the brush. The helicopter soared into the clouds, cutting through the turbulence and breaking out into the clear, calm night above. I closed my eyes and smiled. They told me I would never own a car. They were right. I didn't need a car. I had wings, and I was never coming down. Jada's journey teaches us a powerful truth. True power does not need to roar. It often moves in silence. While her family was consumed by the appearance of wealth, Jada mastered the reality of it. We learn that our worth is never defined by those who refuse to see it, even if they share our blood. Walking away from toxicity isn't a sign of weakness. It is an act of supreme self-respect. Sometimes the best response to disrespect isn't an argument, but a quiet, undeniable victory. Success is the best revenge, but peace is the ultimate freedom. If you believe in moving in silence and letting your success make the noise, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of sweet justice.